Thank you all for joining us today. If we haven't met before, my name is Kelly and I am the founder and executive director of Impact Travel Alliance. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. So our webinar today is on supporting locals in an era of digital travel, and we're going to talk about ways to empower locals through tourism. And we're going to touch upon everything from what it looked like pre-pandemic within the industry to how you can support locals right now in an era of digital travel, and then also looking forward what the industry will look like as it begins to reopen and travel resumes. But before getting started, I wanted to acknowledge an important topic. Diversity, inclusion has always been a core part of our mission at Impact Travel Alliance. But in light of current events, I wanted to emphasize the Black Lives Matter movement. If you follow us on Instagram, you know that we've been sharing a lot of resources and tools to work toward anti-racism. And more importantly than our own action tips, what we're also doing is reposting content onto our stories, which is saved into our highlights directly from Black voices. And the goal there is not just to share those resources with you, but also for you to follow those accounts as well. Internally, we've also been doing an audit of each of our initiatives, from everything to what our team looks like, down to all of our other initiatives, whether that's our content online through our blog or our events. We're looking at ways that we can identify to further support and amplify voices from the Black community. In the industry as a whole, a lot of what I've been seeing is talk from the industry where they're saying that it's important to recognize this movement. And so far, there's some action, but not a ton of it. And so we're firmly advocating for this, not just within the sustainability movement within the industry, but also within the mainstream part of the travel industry as well. In addition to that, all of our events are on a pay-what-you-can basis. If you've paid for this event or our previous one, we're donating 100% of that to go toward the movement for Black Lives. Last but not least, we recognize that this is a starting point. We're listening and we're looking internally at our own blind spots and working to continue to improve. So thank you for being along with us on this journey. And I've said this before, but please hold us accountable as we continue to improve. So diving in, our event today is aimed at empowering locals through travel. And as I said, we're going to discuss tourism before, during, and after the pandemic. Who here, this is always a little bit difficult with online events, but I'd love to hear more from the community. Who here is new to ITA? I'm going to open up a poll right now. Have you ever been to an Impact Travel Alliance event before? We're getting in some results. It looks like most of you are newer, which is exciting. We have about 74% who've answered no, 76% no, and then about 25% who have attended an event before. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. It's helpful to even just know that when you're doing an in-person event, you can kind of gauge the audience, but you certainly can't do that with an online event. So for those of you who are new to our organization, Impact Travel Alliance is a global community and nonprofit, and our vision is to improve the world through travel. We do that through education and advocacy around sustainable tourism and helping travelers understand how they can apply sustainability to all types of travel experiences, no matter the destination or your budget or your travel style. This event today is a multi-chapter event. So we have local chapters all around the world. We have them in 20+ cities. Since our launch in 2015, we've hosted more than 300 events. Throughout the pandemic, we have switched to online programming. Typically with our events, we have about 3 to 4 times a year, we host multi-chapter events. And multi-chapter events are events that happen in different cities at the same time, and they're blanketed by a common theme, whether that's ocean conservation, female empowerment, or anything that we want to take a bigger picture issue and then do a deep dive analysis on that through a local lens. So this is our first multi-chapter event that's occurring in a digital format. We have local chapter leaders here from Bermuda and Lisbon, and you'll be hearing from them later. But this event has been put together with the support of our 20+ chapters worldwide. As a quick introduction, again, my name is Kelly. You'll also be hearing from Vera and Marcel, and there are chapter leaders from Lisbon and Bermuda. Toward the end of the session as well, we have Rachel, the co-founder of Via Hero, who will come on to talk about what they're doing to empower locals right now in this age of digital travel. After the event itself as well, one thing that all attendees will be receiving is a digital guidebook that we've put together in partnership with Via Hero, and that digital guidebook includes recommendations for ways to experience the joy of travel at home right now, as well as ideas for planning about your future trips. And 9 of our local chapters have put these together, ranging from, again, Bermuda and Lisbon down to Hong Kong, Shanghai, New York City. We have a ton of different content for you in there that is ways to experience travel from home and also support locals. So let's talk about travel. Right now, it seems like a foreign concept. I was looking at pictures from, I was in Nepal a year ago, and it seems like such a long time ago that we were able to just get on a plane and go somewhere else around the world and experience a different culture. But again, our goal here with the event is to do analysis of the past, present, and future for the travel industry. And so I want to take a look at what it has traditionally looked like. As travelers, we have a habit of counting stamps on our passports. It's like you're checking off these bucket list destinations, and we have this goal of wanting to say we've been to 10 countries or 20 countries or however many countries. And even in doing that in itself, I recognize that holding a US passport, that inherently has a lot of privilege to it. But beyond that, just the concept of thinking about checking off items off of our bucket list poses problems in and of itself. One thing that I love is even just going back to a destination. I just mentioned Nepal. I have actually been there 3 times, and every time that I go back there, I discover something new and unique about the destination itself. So again, as travelers, we have this habit of counting stamps and counting destinations. And when we look at the industry as a whole, we also have a habit of counting growth and measuring that as success. So every year there's 2 reports that come out from the tourism industry. The first of which is the World Travel and Tourism Council, the WTTC, releases an annual report on spending. And in 2019, they tracked our growth of spending as up by 3.9%. And the UNWTO, which is the UN World Tourism Organization, they count and track the amount of arrivals that we have every year. And then 2019, that was up by 6%. And that's great on one hand when you're like, great, it's growing, growing, growing. And as an industry, we tend to turn and pat one another on the back and say, this is great, this is growth. But there's a problem there, because when you think about how spending is up only about 4%, but arrivals are up 6%, there's a crack in what growth is happening and how it's having an impact on our world around us. So it's important to take a step back and really analyze what we're valuing more and looking at quantity and quality and finding the right balance there. I'm sure you all are familiar with overtourism. This is the the negative impacts of seeing mass tourism and everyone just flocking to one destination. Italy has been hit incredibly hard by the coronavirus. This is what Italy looked like before the coronavirus as well. And to me, everything about this picture is just, it's like, oh my gosh, you don't want to be there. There's way too many people. It's not fun as a tourist. It's not fun as the local as well. And so it's important to really ask ourselves, what do we find meaningful? When you learn about sustainable tourism, I think it just kind of feels like you have this secret where you're like, wow, this is inherently linked to better travel. It has the power to transform yourself as an individual, transform the destination that you're visiting. There's all of these cool stories that you can think about where you're able to connect deeper with that local culture. And it has the power to do things that are, you can preserve 2,000-year-old traditions through the power of tourism and through the power of economic development through travel. And so I think that as you begin to familiarize yourself with the concepts of sustainability, that becomes more and more apparent, and it's all that you want to do. But there's a problem at the same time, because I think most people, when they hear sustainable tourism, they automatically think ethical vacation or responsible trip. And that can also be really hard. I'm in the States. We only get on average about 2 weeks of vacation every year. And if you're like, you want to go on a responsible vacation, that can feel like you're giving something up at the same time. So it's important to take a step back and really challenge the stereotypes around sustainability. If you're new to the concept, when I say sustainable tourism in its most basic definition, what I'm talking about is travel that has a positive impact on local communities, both from a societal standpoint as well as an economic standpoint, as well as for the environment itself. I like to think about sustainability as an umbrella for the industry. Again, rather than being one small subset, it's something that can be applied to any type of travel. Again, no matter the destination that you're visiting, what your travel style looks like, or what your budget is, those core principles of empowering locals and protecting the environment can be applied to all types of travel. So I want to go back to thinking about over-tourism and mass tourism. And that's really important in reshaping how we're thinking about sustainability, because having more tourism is also linked to having more opportunities for locals. And so the opposite of over-tourism is under-tourism, where you have these other destinations that have no travel that's going into that destination. And again, we know that sustainable tourism, travel when done right, can have a really powerful impact on those local communities. And so it's about finding that right balance between how can we provide more opportunities for that community on a mass level, not just talking about boutique shops because or small mom and pop companies, because you have someone who needs to go on a business trip, or you have someone that even thinking about taking a flight. How can you make that sort of travel sustainable and done in a way that's having a positive impact on our world around us? So in that space as well, there's this misconception around corporations and thinking about, it's like this light bulb goes off when you learn about sustainable tourism, and you automatically begin to associate that only with supporting locals. But in order to scale it, we also need to make sure that corporations can be held accountable for their actions as well, and that corporations can be sustainable at the same time. And so there's, again, all of these nuances that are within this about thinking about how can we take mass tourism and then apply sustainability to it, so that we're focused on quantity instead of, we're focused on quality instead of quantity. So tourism obviously has currently been brought to a standstill because of the pandemic. This is a shot in New York City of Madison Avenue, and there's stark differences going outside right now. Even still, I just hit 3 months of social distancing and self-quarantining, and restrictions are starting to let up in New York City. but there's still huge differences between what it looks like here in Brooklyn as opposed to what it used to as well. So the question stands, how can we support locals now, and how can we rebuild a better industry? I have 3 tips to get us started. The first of which is to get curious. To me, my background is in journalism, and so I'm always seeking out the best stories in a destination. And I think that just getting curious about the world around you and constantly seeking out better stories and finding a better way to connect with a local community in an immersive way, that becomes inherently linked to sustainable tourism, and it makes it a little bit easier to figure out. At the same time, getting curious is about challenging the status quo. What systems exist? Why do they exist? And should they exist in the first place? And I think all of that, again, is rooted in this mindset of being curious about our world and always wanting to learn more. And so that's the very, very first step in order to becoming more sustainable in our everyday actions and empowering locals. The second tip that I have is to commit to sustainability. So many of the concepts that we're going to be discussing today are ideas and concepts that can be practiced at home. Just because you want to become a more sustainable traveler, that doesn't mean you have to wait until tourism resumes. In fact, if you start practicing sustainability now, it will become easier when you're abroad, because the more that you learn about sustainability, the more that you realize that it's a journey and that it becomes easier as you practice it over the time. So it's not about flipping everything upside down in your lifestyle right now. It's about saying, what little choices can I begin to make? And that opens your eyes up to all of these other opportunities that you can see. And that becomes easier when you're in a foreign destination if you're used to it when you're at home. The third tip that I have, which is the most important one, is to ask locals. Locals have insight on the best way to experience travel in an immersive way in their own community, and they're also going to be able to share insight on how to support their community at the same time. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Vera to talk about tourism in Lisbon.
Hi, everyone. I believe that you're able to see my screen now. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is...
We can't see your screen.
Can you now?
No.
What can we do? Maybe you'll manage it, Kelly?
I can, yes, I will share mine.
Okay. Sorry for that. So we can pass immediately for the first screen. So my name is Sarah. I'm Portuguese. I got back to Portugal after 15 years abroad. I was living in New York and São Paulo and some places in Italy in the past 15 years, and moved recently to dedicate to my own hospitality business a little bit outside of Lisbon. And the reality that I found in the tourism scene in Portugal, it's very, very different here from when it was 15 years ago. With a big crisis that hit basically all the world in 2009 and 2010, there was a huge investment, private and public, in tourism, which brought a lot of benefits to the country and a reborn of the economy, but had a negative side that we're starting to see more. The first one, I would say, it's the big demand for lodging to host the massive number of tourists that started to arrive, mostly in Lisbon and also in Porto, really caused a huge increase on the price of real estate. That can sound positive for some people, but it's not if you think about all the residents and small business owners that have been living downtown in Lisbon for generations, and all of a sudden they just couldn't afford to live there because rents and the price of real estate were just like going up, increasing many times, doubling. And this has just been forcing people in the last few years out of downtown areas. There was a big movement of big companies buying loads of buildings downtown, redecorating them all in a very standardized way, and keep lodging them to tourists and renting them to tourists in a very standardized way. So if you're booking nowadays, this is very common, you're booking something through Airbnb, you want a real experience, you want to interact with a local, get to know their tips. Through one of these companies, what you will get is like you get to a very anonymous apartment, totally decorated as all of the other ones. Many times the furniture is not even produced locally in Portugal, and you'll only interact by email and you won't have any kind of actually human contact. This not only affects negatively the experience of the tourist itself, as adding to the fact that when you go around in the city, many times downtown in Lisbon now, you don't see any locals because they were just kicked out of their places. And all you see in terms of businesses like big chains that are the only ones that can afford now. And if you've been in Lisbon, it's all about these neighborhoods. They all have their own traditions and their own culture. They've been there for many, many years, and it's interesting, like the mix and the diversity that there is on them. And it's one of the things that it is in risk if there is not a control of the rents and of the value of the real estate. Another big problem, and I've been personally talking with many friends that live in Lisbon, and they say in high season months from June to August, they just cannot get to work. They cannot get public transportation because they are totally crowded. This is a big problem for the locals, and another reason that they are forced to go out of downtown, which in the end causes a deprivation of the neighborhood character. And when you go to a city, it's all about the people and you want to interact with the locals, and this is happening less and less. Another problem, very common in all the cities that have this kind of problem, the pollution, due to the increase of all the motorized vehicles that needed to come to the town to attend to touristy demand. If you've been in Lisbon, you know it's not very bike friendly. There's a lot of ups and downs, narrow roads, so the levels of pollution are getting like really high. For the first time with the pandemic, and it was like one of the few positive sides that you've seen with the pandemic, as in many big cities as well, the pollution levels got down, which gets us to what will tourism look like. If we can go to the next slide, Kelly, please. So how do you see the future for sustainable tourism in Portugal? Well, first of all, I really do hope that people will go deeper into their experience, want something more authentic, and beyond, as Kelly was saying, like just counting the stamps or counting like the number of monuments that you are seeing, or like just something for the selfie to add to your Instagram moment. In Portugal, we are one of the oldest countries in Europe. There's a lot of tradition, a lot of legends, a lot of history to learn. So that's really what I foresee, and I do hope for people to come and really try to learn more about what's in depth in our culture. Another thing that tourists discover Portugal behind Lisbon. We are such a small country, but we are so diverse. There's so many different regions from north to south, from east to west. There's a completely different and it's not very well known or not very promoted yet. As well as the nature travel. Besides the coastline, what is the most famous in Portugal, all the interior side, there's mountains, there's trails, there are forests, lakes that are waiting to be discovered. And last thing, supporting small and sustainable business. This is really important. Small business are a lot with all this pandemic, of course, and they're the one that have less resources to fight and to face all this new phase of restrictions after the pandemic. So the support of tourism is very important for them. And also big corporations, but try to look for the ones that are actually doing some sustainable initiatives. There are a lot of big companies and hotel chains that are doing what they're supposed to do, and they're using local suppliers, using local workers, having a lot of environmental initiatives. So let's hope like there's more and more of this in the future. So to share with you some tips and some interesting insights of companies that are doing really interesting things in Portugal. If in the next slide, we can see some of the examples that I wanted to bring to you. Kelly, can you pass to the next slide, please? One of them is Rota Vicentina. This is a private association of 200 small business located all in the south of Portugal. And they created this trail, 750 kilometers of biking and hiking trails. And they combined the nature conservation with promoting the local culture. If you go into their website, you'll see some videos. They have amazing initiatives of volunteering. You can come, you can bike. The landscape is amazing. At the same time, there are several organized stops in small villages that are totally off the beaten path, and in which that you can interact with locals. Another one is actually a winery. On the next slide, we can see Herdade do Cebolau. They're a 5th generation winery, also in the region of Alentejo. They're very creative and innovative on the way that they treat wine. They're super sustainable. They don't use any kind of chemicals. It's all about organic wines. And they try some crazy things, as you can see here, and you can find more in their Instagram and Facebook accounts. They have like certain lots of wines that they put under the ocean for 2 years, which give them like a unique salty flavor. And then they serve them like, and they sell them like in the bottle still full of seaweed, and like it's like a piece of art and a unique experience. You can go into Instagram and listen to several webinars that they do about wine production in Portugal and about their history itself. And another one is in the region in Algarve. We can see it in the next slide. This initiative is very dear to my heart. It's the Lolé Design Lab. It's actually a public initiative which is located in a beautiful building from the 1800s. I've heard like that this amazing building was lost by someone gambling, and it was very well recovered, and it's used as a hub for traditional artisans and young artists. So by one side, they host like traditional artisans in most cases, like elderly people that struggle with retirement, with loneliness, and they're there to teach like traditional arts, as the weaving, as the copper, the clay work that is very traditional in Portugal. So you can learn how to do it, you can buy their piece of art, like you can actually talk to them, and it's super inspiring to hear like the stories that many of these people have. By the other side, they have a whole hub for young, creative, with innovative projects. They privilege like all the ones connected with economy, circular economy and sustainability. So it's a really interesting mix of tradition and innovation here. I know that they're going to have a shop online very, very soon that you can look into. So to conclude and passing to the next slide, giving some tips for your next travel in Portugal. Definitely explore Portugal off the beaten path. Portugal is so much more than Lisbon and Porto. They're great. Pass there, stay there a couple of days, but then get out of there and go to explore all the small historical villages, the nature. There's a lot online that you can find, like in terms of public tourism organizations. If you go to Turismo de Portugal, visit Portugal, you find many other interesting places. Just adventure, risk, and go to somewhere unknown. I promise that you won't regret it. Traveling the low season, I would say like between April and May and September and October are actually the best moments to travel here in Portugal. You get milder temperatures. There's a lot of activity in terms of cultural events, street markets. You will have like most of the trails and the beaches all for yourself, and you will be helping to fight the problems that the overtourism brings, especially on high season. Supporting the small businesses, again, they really need help, and they're really struggling after this moment with COVID-19. Usually small companies, they have much less budget for marketing, so it's harder to find them in the internet. Take some time to research. Most of them have at least a small presence on social networks. And another interesting tip, and as Kelly was saying in the beginning, just ask the locals. You'll find that in Portugal, everyone is really hospitable and will try to talk with you in the same language that you are talking, whatever it is. And when you go for a coffee, when you go to the restaurant, ask like to the person who is serving you, like for some secrets. They will be super happy to share it with you, and you will have a much more unique experience. And to conclude, something that seems we shouldn't have to say this anymore, but avoid single-use plastic. One of the concerns with this pandemic is that there will be the trend to start using more disposable plastics because of the concern with the germs. It is dangerous. There is still a lot of plastic in the oceans and in the beaches in Portugal. You'll find that even if there's a lot of private initiatives to clean up, people still need to be very much educated. So please keep that in mind. And that is all for Portugal. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have in the end, and I will pass it to Marcel in Bermuda now.
Hey, hi. I'm not sure if everyone can see my screen or see me. So hi, I'm from Bermuda. My name is Marcel. I've worked in the hospitality industry. I am also a taxi driver in Bermuda. I've born and raised in Bermuda, lived my whole life there except for when I traveled, when I was abroad in school. So Bermuda is a very small island. We're located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We are still a British colony, and we have a population of approximately 65,000. So that's a bit about Bermuda. We can move on to the next slide. So before the COVID-19, just to give you a picture of what tourism was like in Bermuda, because we're such an isolated island, there are really only two ways to get to the island. You can either fly or you can take a cruise. The other way, which is not as popular, is if you have a private yacht. So if you're really fortunate, you can cruise in on your yacht. So those are the two main ways. Over the years, we've had a steady rise in the number of cruise passengers and a decline in the number of airline arrivals. So last year alone, we had 595,000 cruise passengers. And in terms of air arrivals, we had just over 100,000. So that's what the travel industry looked like in Bermuda. Lots of cruises, cruise passengers, and all really around the time of May, June, and July that we had our passengers. We do have cruises outside of this time and passengers and other tourists that arrive outside of these times, but these are the most popular times, the times where we see the highest number of our visitors come to the shores. So as you can see, there's a couple of cruise ships that are docked in the picture below. And so we can get maybe up to maybe two, I'm not sure about three, but two cruise ships, and each carrying maybe about 3,000 people. So you have maybe 6,000 people that are descending onto the destination at once when cruise ships are in these numbers. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So another thing that the tourism industry looked like is, with the cruise industry, we all know that there is less economic contribution from cruise passengers as opposed to airline passengers. And we all know that cruise ships are not that great for the environment. So I know that Bermuda is trying to move into the direction of increasing its air arrivals, primarily for that purpose, to have a more of a economic input into the economy. And one of the things that we found with a lot of cruise ship passengers is that it can lead to overcrowding when you have thousands of people just descending on the destination all at once. It can impact our public transport. It can impact restaurants and beaches. And one of the things that Bermuda is really well known for is the high level of standard. And so this can often get compromised if there's such a large number of people that we're trying to cater to at the same time. Is our level of standard is compromised. And the tourists themselves, it's not a win-win for either party. The tourists are not getting the level of service that they should be getting, and the local experience from the overcrowding, locals are not enjoying it as much. So it's not a win-win for either party. We want tourists to come here and enjoy their time here, and we, everyone wants the locals or Bermudians to feel comfortable at the same time. And so with such a short stay on cruise ships, we do have quite a number of experiences that they can engage in. However, because they're here for such a short amount of time, having a really authentic Bermudian experience isn't often had by visitors. And so we really want our visitors to have the best time they can in Bermuda, to have a really immersive and authentic experience. But with large numbers, there may not be the capacity to cater to everyone so that they can have that experience. If we can move to the next slide. So post-COVID, what I'm hoping for in Bermuda is that we can move to a much more sustainable model. Now, don't get me wrong, Bermuda has made some great strides in sustainability in terms of our environment and reducing the environmental footprint of our visitors. We've moved to electric vehicles. We have eco tours. So we're really trying to push the environmental side of what we do here in Bermuda. And I'm hoping also that we can move to a more holistic approach to sustainability, which involves the preservation of our culture, which is also in the development now and is really starting to grow quite a bit. And for visitors to really stimulate the economy by supporting local businesses and local experiences. The other thing that I'm hoping for is that Bermuda becomes certified, that they gain a certification as a sustainable destination. We are known to be a unique destination. We're not quite the Caribbean, but we're known for some unique traits. And I think becoming a sustainable destination will differentiate us even more. I think it just has a profound impact on the way that we can move forward in terms of visitors will then know that we are a sustainable destination, because the number of travelers who are seeking those sort of experiences is growing exponentially. So I think that would help us in that way. I also think that the tourism businesses would then become more aware and implement sustainable policies into their business practices. So I think it just can have a profound impact. And more importantly is that sustainability is also about travelers visiting off-peak. So if we can brand ourselves into a sustainable destination, we can draw a lot of travelers who are looking for off-peak experiences and traveling when there are less crowds. So like I said, Bermuda is really moving into an eco space right now. And I just hope that we could just take a more holistic approach in terms of the other parts of sustainability. If we can move to the next slide. So as I said earlier, traveling during the low season, hopefully we can encourage travelers to have more local and authentic experiences. Traveling during the off season to avoid the large crowds, really contribute and act as a stimulus to the economy with supporting local businesses. We have to balance out quality versus quantity. It is a balance. You know, people are just opting to take cruises now for whatever reason. It could be more value for money. It could be because the airlines are more expensive. But if more people maybe opt to fly to Bermuda, maybe that will bring down the costs of flights. And so we can look at quality rather than quantity. The other thing is that it has to be a collaborative approach. We talked about the airlines, we talked about the cruise ships, hotels, tourism businesses. Everyone has to work together to make this sustainable initiative work. If we can move to the next slide, please. Off-season travel has many benefits. In Bermuda, we have a host of festivals that happen outside of the busy tourism months. One of my favorite is the Gombe Festival. It's a 3-day festival that features our dancers, our musicians. These are traditional dancers and musicians that have been around since the 1800s. And it is a real time to immerse in our culture, to mingle with the locals, to really get a feel for our culture. We heard from Vera earlier, and you know, Bermuda, I don't know if anyone knows this, but our culture is a blend of Portuguese, Caribbean, and British influences. So our second language here is Portuguese, actually. So you can see these traits in a lot of our cultural traditions, and even with our Gombe dancers. We can move on to the next slide, please. So as I said, Bermuda's moving into that space of eco-friendly activities. When travel resumes again, which is quite soon because our borders are due to open on the 1st of July. And so they have measures in place to open our borders. So if you get a chance to come to Bermuda, one of many eco-friendly activities is an electric bike tour. I've put that up on the screen so that you can see the name of it. It's called Patago, and they have a few tours that can take you all around the island. It's a good way to travel slowly and get a real feel for what the island is about, to get to see nature, to be led by a local tour guide. The other initiative that I put up on the screen is a jewelry maker. She finds plastic that's been washed up on the beaches and she repurposes it into jewelry. So that's a great social enterprise that she's come up with, and it's called La Garza. You can find her on Facebook as well as online. Can move to the next slide. So my tips for travelers is, as Kelly mentioned earlier, you know, becoming a sustainable traveler, it begins right where you are. And it's no better time to start than now while travel is at a standstill. It's just all about being sustainable and practicing sustainability where we are right now. You know, some tips we've all heard before, you know, use your recycled water bottle, carry a reusable bag. And the other tips that I have up on the screen: fly instead of cruising to the island, which means that you can stay longer. This may be a bit controversial because we know that flying does produce a high level of carbon emissions, but there are ways to offset your carbon emissions, firstly by simply offsetting your carbon emissions. And the second way is what I like to call insetting, is that when you get to your destination, when you get to Bermuda, you can donate to an organization that is responsible for protecting or conserving the environment, an organization that plants trees, so that you are contributing to offsetting your carbon in that way. The other way is travel during the off season. Avoid the large crowds. Get a real feel for the destination, Bermuda, that you're visiting. Get more of an opportunity to connect with the locals. You get more of an opportunity to have a more authentic experience. Choose local businesses when you travel here. Social enterprises. You can donate to a nonprofit or a cause that you care about. You can volunteer with a nonprofit. So there are ways to be a more sustainable traveler and contribute to the further sustainability of communities. Souvenirs, you know, we travel to islands and we like to pick up souvenirs. We have such a host of talented Bermudians, artisans, and I think this is just a great way to support them as well as taking a souvenir back. So why not opt for a great piece of artwork by one of our artisans? It's a great way to remember Bermuda, and it's quite unique. If you can move on to the next slide. All right, so that's me. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thank you, Marcel. And to your point about traveling in the off season, one of the things that I love about visiting Bermuda is that it's so close. From New York City, it's only a 2-hour flight, and it's beautiful year round. I've been in January before, and January is pretty miserable in New York City. So it's a great way to have an island escape in January.
Yes, very convenient.
So I wanted to bring it back to my home in New York City. This year, I'm coming up on my 9-year anniversary here. It's actually the longest that I've lived anywhere. And in thinking about tourism and thinking about how we can work to empower locals through travel, I think a lot about my own city and the stereotypes that there are around New Yorkers, which include that New Yorkers are rude and also that we hate tourists. And I think that's a big reason of why this happens is because there's a disconnect and a lack of communication between travelers and locals. So for example, one pet peeve that a lot of New Yorkers have is that so many tourists are walking along the sidewalk and they'll stop in the middle of the sidewalk to take a picture. And on one hand, I'm like, I get it. It's beautiful. New York City is a really exciting city to be in. And on the other hand, New Yorkers are like, I'm going to work. I'm really busy. As Vera was mentioning, it can become harder when you're just trying to get from point A to point B. And tourists are looking around and they're not thinking about necessarily that there's someone there who's trying to go to work. And so one big piece of advice that I always have for travelers who are visiting New York is it's great if you want to take a picture of the city. I love it. It's beautiful. New Yorkers are really, really proud of their city. But just move over to the side of the sidewalk and then look up and take a photo so that you're not blocking someone behind you. So there's that balance there. That's just, if you take an extra moment to listen to the local perspective and empathize from where they're coming from, that makes it a better experience for everyone involved. And one really great company to do that is through Urban Adventures. They teach you to see the city like a local. I love when you go on one of their tours, they'll teach you, they'll not only take you to the best spots, but they'll also say, here's how you order a bagel. Here's how you get the best experience. Here's how you ride the subway. And so all of that is inherently linked to having a deeper, more immersive experience when you're traveling. And it's, again, better for the locals and travelers alike. So if there's one takeaway that you leave this event with, it's that it's so important to listen to locals, and that equals having a better experience for you as the traveler, and also is a win for the locals as well. Locals are the best positioned to protect their homes because they live there and they want it to be a livable destination for years and years and years. So it's so important to listen to them. And on that note, I wanted to turn it over to Rachel. Rachel is the co-founder of Via Hero, and Via Hero is a travel company that connects you with a local to help plan your trip.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Yeah, great to be here with everyone. So my name is Rachel. As Kelly said, I'm the co-founder of Via Hero. I'm an avid traveler myself. I spent some time in college and graduate school, both living and studying in West Africa, in Niger, in Cameroon. I was part of a language documentation effort. And I had the opportunity during this time to meet some truly incredible people. And it was the connection with locals that really allowed me to dive into the culture, to see a different side of a destination than I would have otherwise. And that really enriched my experience. And it's this type of meaningful connection with locals that's at the heart of Via Hero and what we do. So a few years ago, I co-founded the company, which, as Kelly mentioned, we connect you with a local to plan your trip based on your personal travel style. So our mission is twofold. We empower you to travel independently and broaden your perspective. And we invest in the destinations that we visit by supporting locals and their communities. And the type of travel that we promote at Via Hero is really getting you off the beaten path, away from the top 10 tourist spots. And this not only counters over-tourism, but allows travelers to really dive a bit deeper into the culture, have those really rich, immersive experiences. So I just want to talk to you briefly about our new product called Bucket List. This is actually something that we launched during the pandemic as a way to support locals at a time when travel was essentially at a standstill. And what Bucket List is a personalized set of recommendations for a destination that's created by a local. We call our locals heroes. And our heroes keep 70% of the income of travel planning. So the Bucket List product, it's not tied to particular travel dates like our regular itinerary guidebook service, but it's more tapping into that dream now, travel later concept. So the recommendations are hyper local, they're off the beaten path, and they're also tied to some digital experiences. So meaning ways you can experience the culture at home, whether it's activities, recipes from a restaurant that they're recommending you go to while you're there, music to listen to, movies that were filmed there, things like that. And I'll just close out by saying that the real focus of Bucket List, as well as with our core product and our company, is supporting locals and really keeping tourism dollars within the local communities. And I'm really excited to share this with all of you. Happy to answer any questions you have at the end.
Thank you so much, Rachel. With that, we're going to open it up to a Q&A. If there's any questions from the audience, feel free to type them into either the Q&A feature or the chat. As some of those questions start to funnel through, I'm going to take a moment to tell you guys about our next event. This Thursday, we're hosting an event on spotting and avoiding greenwashing. We have a diverse set of different industry experts from various backgrounds within the industry, and we're going to be talking about things like why are there so many brands out there that seem to think that it's okay that they can get rid of plastic straws, but not the rest of their single-use plastic. We're going to talk about if corporations can truly be sustainable. So we're really excited about this event and bringing it together to have a conversation again with a lot of different industry experts with a diverse set of backgrounds. Are there any questions that you guys wanted to ask? Julianne, it looks like one for you, Rachel. Julianne owns a small custom design travel agency, and she's looking to add these kinds of experiences to the itinerary she designs. How can a travel advisor work with you?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have worked with a handful of travel advisors, and oftentimes it's been sort of behind the scenes, and we're open to different opportunities here, but basically we'll work with you directly as a travel advisor, set you up with a local, and you kind of act more as that in between, and then they'll build the entire custom guidebook for you in turn for your travelers, and you're able to package that as however you see fit, and pass that along.
And I know that Maria had asked a question that Marcel answered in the chat, but Maria asked, what's the certification options that you're looking at for Bermuda to become a sustainable destination? And Marcel said the GSTC. For anyone who's not familiar, that's the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. Randy Durbin, the CEO, is actually going to be on our panel later this week for the greenwashing one. Marcel, I don't know if you wanted to expand upon at all about the GSTC and that certification program.
Yeah, can you hear me, Callie?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, the GSTC, they offer all sorts of training. So if you're interested in just learning more about sustainable tourism, you can do that as an individual. And they also support destinations who are interested in getting certified as a whole destination. So it audits, it does assessments on the destination's different sustainable strategies, and really helps them to put a strategy in place where I think that maybe they do an audit every year to make sure that the destination maintains their certification so that they can continue to be a sustainable destination. And it's quite rigorous, and it is quite well known around the world as well. So having a certification like that does give a destination some credibility. Hope that helps.
And Serena asked, slow travel and less flying are very significant ways to create a positive local impact and to reduce environmental impact. How can countries or organizations like Impact Travel Alliance or Via Hero encourage this? I'll answer on behalf of ITA. We have a lot of content, whether it's events like this. We also have a lot of online content as well, where we're encouraging travelers to make more ethical and conscious decisions. And again, correlating that just by encouraging travelers to say, this is the best type of tourism. This is how you're going to have the best possible experience. So something like going somewhere for longer, slow travel, you're going to get a more immersive and unique glimpse into that destination, because you're not just hopping from destination to destination and only staying for a short amount of time. We have a lot of online content as well. I feel like with our events, we're really only able to skim the surface. This event is an hour long, and we're talking about supporting locals through tourism. We did a deep dive on 2 different destinations, but each of those deep dives are only 10 minutes long. So we always work to supplement our events where we're engaging with travelers in a face-to-face or a digital format throughout conversations, and then backing that up with more resources and tools as well. So for example, we have a blog post online about what is sustainable tourism and everything a traveler needs to know about traveling in a way that has a positive impact on local communities and the environment. We've also done one at the beginning of the year that talked about the biggest trends to look forward to, and that's thinking about more things like under tourism and how can you balance under tourism versus over tourism. So it's really a joint effort around educating travelers, and through in-person digital events like this, as well as our online content as well. Rachel, did you want to answer that for Via Hero?
I'm not seeing that question, Kelly. Was that in the chat?
It is in the Q&A section.
Yeah.
But just to repeat it, slow travel and less flying are very significant ways to create a positive local impact and to reduce environmental impact. How can countries/organizations like ITA or Via Hero encourage this?
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I think Kelly really covered it. I'll just say there are so many small choices that we make as travelers when we go somewhere that are not even conscious. And I think working with a local ahead of time, connecting with them, can just give you really a leg up on other travelers, because you have sort of that perspective of a destination. You can ask those questions in advance. You can find out what places are owned locally. You can understand the transportation systems in a way that allows you to arrive there and not be intimidated by taking the bus or other modes of transportation that are going to reduce your carbon footprint while you travel. And there are a lot of things like that honestly are easier when you have that little bit of confidence. We can do that in our own homes because they're our homes. We're confident. We're not brand new. And sometimes as a tourist arriving somewhere, there's already enough that intimidation factor, that you just kind of do what feels comfortable and what feels safe. So with Be a Hero, we connect you ahead of time with a local, and they're able to really allow you to arrive with this confidence, and that can make it much easier to make sustainable choices and even ask the right questions, and have someone who you can ask those questions to, because that's a big part of it, I think, is just not knowing how to find things out. If you may want to travel sustainably as best you can in different ways, but you're not really sure how to do that or what that means in a destination, and a local really knows best. So that's how we help facilitate that.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before as well, sustainability is a journey. It's about all of these little habits that you're practicing on a day-to-day basis, and just continuing to learn more over time. And as Marcel was saying, if you're visiting Bermuda, flying there is an option to stay longer and have a better impact on the local community. And so it's about figuring out how you navigate that space of, okay, I'm going to get on a flight, but how can I do that with an airline company that's committed to sustainability? And that could be anything from saying, what we try to teach our travelers within the Impact Travel Alliance community, we're talking about innovation within the industry. And so that could be something like saying you're going to fly on JetBlue because you know that they have invested for a long time in renewable fuel sources, and really just pushing for innovation within the industry. Or it could say there's a trick, like you can go onto Skyscanner and they have a greener choices label where you're able to see which flight has the lowest carbon footprint. And so it's about, again, there's all of these nuances that are related to sustainability, and we're pushing for celebrating innovation within the industry. We have one more question from Julianne. I'm going to have this one, and then we'll wrap it up from there because I know we're a couple minutes over. But Julianne said, I also have luxury travelers who are interested in supporting local businesses and volunteer, but there is also a need to educate travelers who still prefer travel on a more luxury level, always trying to make this work together. Yeah, I think that's the balance as well. Again, sustainability can be applied to any type of travel style. And so it's about figuring out which brands are aligned with that, and also have a commitment to sustainability, and figuring out how you have the best balance there. In a lot of ways, it can become easier to do sustainability when you have a little bit of extra money to spend, because you know that that money is going toward locals and you're paying them a fair rate. That's not to say that sustainable tourism always has to be luxury travel. There's ways to have it on a budget conscious trip as well. I always think in many ways that sustainability is a little bit of a budget hack in many ways, where you figure out those little tips and tricks to be able to balance sustainability with whatever your budget looks like. Julianne asked if there's a resource of hotels and destinations that practice sustainable policies. There's not one resource. This is a lot of what we'll cover on our event on Thursday. So I encourage you all to sign up for that, because it's a complex topic that I can't quite cover in the very end of an event. But essentially, the short answer to this is that it's hard for the world's largest industry to have one go-to resource, because every certification program is different, every company is different, every destination is different. And so the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, which Marcel mentioned earlier, they're really working to clean up what that space looks like, and make sure that it is, no matter how big or small you are or what destination you represent, because each destination, again, is going to be unique, that it becomes easier to sift through all of that. But again, it's a complex topic, and I hope that you all are able to come to Thursday's event, because we're going to be doing a deep dive analysis on that. And with that, I am going to close it off. We do, if you're not familiar, we do have a Facebook group as well. We tend to keep conversations like this going after the event as well. So if you have additional questions, search on Facebook for Impact Travel Alliance, and you will be able to connect with all of us directly. Thank you again to everyone who came today, and thanks to all of our speakers who shared their insight and expertise.